Mrs. Stiff?
Present.
Mr. Kennedy? Mr. Edmond?
Here.
Mrs. Lynn?
Here.
Mrs. Guerrero-Numer?
Present.
Mr. Bean?
Present.
Mr. Coffey?
Here. You stand for the pledge, please. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Forgive me. On behalf of the Board of Education, I would like to welcome all of our visitors in person and those who's watching via live stream at this time. Member of the public may make comments to the Board of Education on any item listed on the agenda. Please note that it's not the opportunity or the venue for the Board of Education members to engage in conversation or provide response. The Board of Education respects and values your information delivered during this public comment. Your comments should be directed to the Board of Education. And all in audience must conduct themselves in respect toward others. You must conclude your comments in 3 minutes. Thank you. Mrs. Rico, please call the name of the first individual wishing to address the board.
Sure. Mr. Dave Harris? Dave, when you get up, just make that sure the green light is on the mic so that it's on. Is it red or green?
It's red, so just press the
Yes,
button.
please. Green?
We good?
Yep, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you for allowing me this time to speak. My name's David Harris. My wife is Susan Harris. I am outraged to have to be up here and speak. Superintendent Guzman has proposed and brought forward to you some discipline that she wants to impose on my wife. That discipline is based off an accusation of a student, an outlandish accusation of the student against my wife. There's no facts backing up this accusation, not one. Basically, Superintendent Guzman is basing this discipline off what a few people think or what they believe. Where's the facts? There's none. I've seen criminals get more consideration than my wife. As a dean, Sue could not hand out discipline on something she believes or thinks. She needs facts. Since this incident started 52 days ago, it has turned our world upside down. It kills me to witness what this has done to my wife, to Susan Harris. The last 7 weeks has been a living hell for her. Sue has been with this district for 25 years. Every review in her file is excellent. The best you get is a review. She loves this job. She's been a dedicated employee. She loves this district. Oh, but granted, she's been shaken a little bit on what's been happening. My wife is not a liar. That I know. 30 years of marriage, and I know that. This administration, not the school board, this administration has thrown Sue under the bus based on an accusation by a student. A student with a track record. Student's word versus a dean's word. No facts backing up the student's accusation. No facts. Every employee should be outraged and terrified because this can happen to any of you. Imagine if you were a student. Imagine if you're a teacher, a dean, a counselor, security personnel. Look at these back three rows right now are here to support Sue. If you're one of these people.
Sorry, Mr. Harris, your time is up.
Words can't describe how this has torn me up to watch this happen to Sue. Please, take in the big picture. Take into everything into account. Because it's so important. Don't tear apart this girl's career, my wife's career, and her future, based on accusations, beliefs, and thoughts, and what we think. Go with facts. And if you can't go with facts, go to character. Who's got the better character? Thank you for your time. I'm sorry for going over.
Thank you.
Have a good day. Thank you, everybody.
Ms. Rico,
Sure.
call the next.
Miss Maddie Myers?
Good evening. My name is Maddie Myers. I'll be a junior at Joliet West in August, and I'll be referencing the 2022 Cultural Responsiveness and School Climate Survey. The past few years have been tough on everyone, but I do not see that as an excuse to let certain behavior go without consequences. I have consulted the most recent version of the JTHS student handbook and found that the consequences for unacceptable behavior or student are stated clearly. When I read through the disciplinary section, I was genuinely confused. This past school year, I do not believe that many of those guidelines were followed. Yes, verbal conversations can be conducted, but actual consequences must be given as well. A violent and unsafe environment was created because more extensive disciplinary measures were not given. I hope that in this coming school year we can get back on track. My next point that I would like to cover was the treatment of staff members. Disrespect did not discriminate when it came to what specific staff members were treated poorly. It was extremely upsetting to see so many staff members continuously be mistreated, but no consequences came from it. There were even specific situations where staff members were physically assaulted. I do not believe that the staff has been supported to the best degree possible. They deserve to feel safe in and enjoy their workplace, and most of all, they deserve to be treated with respect. I know these problems that I am addressing are not solely confined to Joliet. These issues are affecting schools all over our country. But tonight I ask you all, why can't our community be an example of change? Why can we not work together and create a more positive and safe environment for our children and adults? What if we created a student board that meets regularly with representatives from each grade in school? What about sending out monthly surveys to students and staff that asks if they are facing any problems, and if so, what can we do to help? What if a link with all of our mental health resources was put into the weekly email? And what about including staff members in on policy making so that they can feel like their voices are being heard? I am hoping that by speaking today, I can spark some inspiration. Change needs to happen, but I cannot do that by myself. So I am looking for the support of my district leaders to help me in the process of making our schools safer, respectable, and uplifting. Thank you.
Thank you.
That concludes public speaking.
go to our consent agenda. I'd like to have a motion to approve consent agenda A through D, A through E, sorry.
So moved.
Roll call, please.
Mrs. Guerrero Numer?
Yes.
Mr. Bean?
Yes.
Mr. Coffey?
Yes.
Mrs. Stiff?
Yes.
Mr. Edmund?
Yes.
Mrs. Lynn?
Yes.
We have the new recognitions and awards at this time. So we move to our superintendent report.
Yes, at this time, I don't have any correspondence or legislative report, but we do have our first presentation, our bond refunding presentation. So Kyle Harding?
Yes, and just a little background information for the board. As in the past, we've had several opportunities to refund our bonds because interest rates were low. We have this opportunity in front of us now. As we know, interest rates are rising quickly. So this is information that will be shared with you tonight, and we will have a recommendation at the July board meeting to move forward if the board chooses so.
Thank you, Dr. Hampton. Superintendent, board president, members of the board, thank you for the opportunity to be here. Again, my name is Kyle Harding with the law firm Chapman and Cutler. We're serving as your bond counsel on this proposed issuance. As Dr. Hampton mentioned, unfortunately, Elizabeth Hennessy of Raymond James, who is serving as placement agent, had a conflict and was unable to be here. Also, as Dr. Hampton mentioned, there is no action item for the board tonight. The bond resolution that's before you in draft format will be back before you on July 19th, and at that time we expect to have final pricing information. The bond resolution authorizes the issuance of bonds to refund your Series 2013 bonds. Those bonds become callable on January 1, 2023. The amount of this new issue is expected to be $1.6 million, and the new bonds are expected to close on October 3rd. Now, the purpose of this refunding is to restructure your debt burden. Again, following up on what Dr. Hampton mentioned, to restructure your debt burden to allow some room in your debt service extension base for a future issuance in either 2023 or 2024. The district is subject to the property tax extension limitation law, or tax caps, which mean all of your debt service, all the taxes that you levy to pay your bonds, is capped at a certain amount. And so this restructuring, this refunding opportunity provides you an opportunity to take a look at your future financing needs and take that into account when you're doing this refinancing. The other thing that I'll mention is that this proposed financing is what we would call a forward delivery. As you no doubt are aware, interest rates have gone up significantly since the beginning of the year, and it's the recommendation of Raymond James as your placement agent that the district seek to lock in those rates sooner than later. So that's, again, why we're looking to try and have final pricing in front of you at the July 19th board meeting. Although the district will be looking to lock in those interest rates on July 19th, the district won't actually be delivering the bonds. We won't actually be closing until we get to October 3rd. And the reason for that is that under federal tax law, the IRS won't let you do the refunding of the 2013 bonds until you're within 90 days of that January 1st, 2023 call date. So we have to wait. We price the bonds, but we have to wait 2 months before we can close. It's possible with that forward delivery structure that the winning bidder or the purchaser might have some additional terms that they want as part of their bid because they'll be making an investment decision in July, but actually won't be receiving the bonds until October. If there are any terms like that, they'll be discussed with your placement agent, with Dr. Hampton, and ultimately reflected in that resolution that we expect to bring back to you next month. And with that, if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
What are we looking at in a proposed spread between current versus new based on the rate environment we're in today?
Well, again, that would be not again, but that would be a good question for Elizabeth. She's, again, representing you on the financial side. I'm just the attorney, but I did have a chance to look at some numbers that she provided to us. And this is a restructuring. So we're contemplating the 2023 or the 2024 issuance, building in about $10 million of new money in this restructuring. And with that restructuring, and not extending the term beyond the original maturity of the 2013s, the DIS savings in the current interest environment is $54,000. So I am sure, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but if we just went with a level savings, I'm sure even with these higher interest rates, with the bonds being currently callable, there is a savings opportunity, but you're trading some of that savings to facilitate the issuance in 2 years at a much lower rate, or a much more advantageous structure where you can start to amortize your bonds right away as opposed to putting your bonds all out very long and just having to make interest-only payments. But we can definitely follow up.
Yes, we'll follow up, and this is also part of the long-term strategy that we've shared with the board in terms of the upcoming projects, the renovation of the tracks, a football field, the culinary spaces at each campus, the T&I building, where this structure will allow us to assume more dollars for these projects. And another resolution we'll bring forth to the board is to borrow from ourselves so that we can start these projects a year early. And then when we can sell the bonds, we'll sell them at that point. And then we'll definitely get that information from Elizabeth in terms of what the estimate is versus what the actual will be once we get to July.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next agenda item is, I just wanted to provide an update to the board for strategic planning and ask Mr. Edmund, Mr. Coffey to help as they represented the board on strategic planning. At your seat, you should have a handout with this is the draft beliefs, parameters, objectives, mission, and strategies. And the first 2 pages are the entire draft, and the last pages actually shows you the specific changes that the team is recommending. And so just to give you context, it was 3 days, 8 to 5, and I think we were there 8 to 5 every single day. The team was comprised of 35 members, included students, parents, staff, external partners, and it was a good representative of our internal and external community. And we had our outside facilitator, and we began with our beliefs. And again, looking at each and every one of those and every single word of all of these things. So these beliefs are what we believe, not picking and choosing, but believe in all of them. And then the parameters are how we do business as an organization. And then when you get to the mission statement, the recommendation from the committee, and there was discussion on this, was to merge the mission statement as well as the diversity statement together, because the mission statement is who we are and our loftiest aspiration. And so to have 2 statements, the committee didn't believe reflected us the way that we should be reflected. And so a lot of thought went into that, and as a team, we agreed on this new draft mission statement, and then also the objectives. And so there's some changes to the objectives as well as the addition of a objective that is specific to student absenteeism. And then lastly, we have our 4 draft proposed strategies. And so and I should stop there. Does anybody have any questions about any of the information in front of you? And again, you're not voting on anything. This is draft at this point. When we start the school year, we're starting under our current strategic plan, our current beliefs and parameters and mission. This will be shared with all of our staff at Opening Institute Day, but it'll be clearly communicated that it's still in draft form. Nothing is finalized until the board takes action, which would hopefully be December or January. So then next steps, we have these strategies, so we would work towards finalizing our facilitators for each strategy. We would look to identify 8 facilitators in total, 2 for each strategy. We would set up training with our consultant, as well as Christine and I would be in that training as well, and make sure you're prepared. It's a very prescriptive process if you haven't been through it. It's about 12 weeks, the work of the action planning teams. So these facilitators will take these strategies and they will go through a series of activities and determinations, and they, as a team with individuals, and many of you, I would encourage you to join the strategy teams as well, will craft action plans that will come back to the strategic planning team on December 1st. And then based on that, it could be that something is returned back to an action planning team, or there's questions or clarification that's needed. And that's why I say it will come back to the board in December or January for approval. It might not be in December based on if there's additional work that needs to be done. When I've talked to members of the strategic planning team, and I know Christine and many of us have talked to individuals, I know everyone I've talked to said that they believe it went really well, that they felt that really good about the changes that were recommended, and are very excited about the strategies that are in place. And I don't know, Mr. Coffey or Mr. Edmond, if you'd like to add anything.
I would echo that. I thought it was an interesting process. Going through it for the first time, I wasn't sure I was going to come together. It seemed very haphazard, but the process, we were told at the beginning to trust the process, and I did that, and it came together perfectly. There was a ton of passion in the room. I thought that we did have a very diverse group that were very passionate, and I don't think that there was anyone that didn't participate or have comments or have opinions. It was pretty impressive to see 35 people come to consensus on every dot point that you see on this page, and I'm honored to be part of it. I'm glad I was part of it, and I think what has come out is a great start for the action teams.
I echo what Mr. Coffey says. I really enjoy the strategic planning process. I trust the process. I believe in what we did was good work. Everything was transparent. There's a lot of emotion in the process. I'm glad to be there. And I think that after the action planning team get a hold of this document, I believe that they will have the tools to be able to make it work and to be able to share this with the district and us going forth, because even students was on here, community people, whether staff and board members. The voices was at the table to be able to make a change. So I was excited about what I seen. I'm really passionate about the mission statement, and you're going to hear more about that later. But I'm passionate about the mission statement, that we all are included in one statement. So that's all I have.
Any questions from the board? The last part of the document is just a reminder, as we enter into the school year, we will be working on the next strategic plan, but we're still working under the current strategic plan. So we still have items in progress, and those are listed, and this information will also be shared with the strategy teams to make sure that they look at the action plans that haven't been solidified or operationalized. So as we move forward, things that were not finished will still be things that the strategy teams will get to determine, do they want to move forward with it based on their research, Or is there new direction because there's more research out now? You know, this strategic plan was created in 2015 and then reopened in 16. So a lot's happened since then, including the global pandemic and some just different, you know, consequences or variables that we have now that we didn't have at that time. And so we are going to approach the strategy teams with some more formalized information at the beginning to make sure that the strategy teams have everything that they need to do their work. Any questions? Okay, so then moving on, and this is connected, the Hanover Climate and Culture Survey. And so the first survey, the larger survey, and we're not going to go over it in its entirety. The information's in there. This information was shared with the strategic planning team. It will also be shared with each strategy action planning team. And as you can see with the strategies, there's some, you're going to see that this information did inform some of the information in the strategies. For example, the areas for recommendations based on the survey, and again, there's more information in here, but this is the analysis from Hanover. Obviously a focus on student safety, which we heard tonight, student mental health and social emotional skills, and student belonging and engagement in the classroom. And so you see those things in the objectives as well as in the strategies, as well as actually in the beliefs and parameters. There were certain words that were added, like a focus on student supports, a focus on equity, and that's pervasive through the entire draft document. And so this information, like I said, will be shared. When Hanover gave us the April document, I also asked them to complete a supplemental analysis, and so that's in the shorter document. This too will be shared with the strategy teams. And just because I think it's important, and what I asked them to do was to look at the areas where students and staff are in different places. So a good example of that is, and this is overall, but student perception of their schools to ability to prepare students in various ways is generally more positive than staff perceptions. Also, there's a significant disagreement between students and staff regarding adherence to safety guidelines. And then lastly, perceptions on the degree to which students access online resources to support learning and complete homework assignments also varies. We also have a supplemental data board. I'm going to call it a data dashboard that will also be given access by the planning teams via administrators on the teams or facilitators. And what this does is there's a tab for year. So we gave this survey in 2019, then again in 2022. So the survey year tab gives a comparison between 19 and 22 to see, again, did things change? Did things improve? You know, considering and understanding that the pandemic occurred as well. Also, specifically for the 2022 survey, is there a difference disaggregated by role? So role in the district, students, parents, students, also administration. Also, we can look at things by school, and then we can look at things by school and year between the surveys, school and grade, meaning students. So did 9th graders feel differently than 10th graders? That's really going to help, especially too with our MTSS work, maybe focusing on what 9th graders need versus 11th graders, and then school and role. So as I said, the strategy teams will have access to all this information, and there's a lot of data there. But then this data will also be shared with admin this summer, and we'll review it and we'll utilize it to again, there's some recommended focuses on here that have found themselves in the strategic plan, but then also is there a specific focus that a building wants to make based on the survey. And then lastly, we have talked to Hanover about once we have a chance to review this with administration, we want to delve more deeply into certain areas and then also progress monitor. So before the pandemic, the plan was with the 2019 survey to do some student groups to get more in-depth student voice. So we want to do that with Hanover. And then also, Diane, can you talk about the pulse surveys?
Right, so the pulse surveys are what it is. So it's just to measure, how things are with our students and staff. So working.
It would be a deeper dive
Dive.
into like measuring certain things. So
So based on the survey, the data and areas that we want to dive into, we have a meeting with Hanover next month to start talking about what are those components in that pulse survey that we would send out on a regular basis. So really, it would be almost quarterly throughout the school year. So we would send out potentially a pulse survey, I would say like maybe in October, once the school year starts, and then we would use that data to, within our administrative team, and we would share it out where we are, and then they would even potentially adjust the next pulse survey based on the data that we just collected. So it's a nice way to sort of, instead of waiting 2 more years for one of these big surveys, to send out smaller little surveys just to get a feel of where everybody is as we progress through the school year.
I mean, and I'm looking at the recommendations now and also what's coming, the draft out of the strategic plan, just some areas of focus would probably be restorative practices, safety, equity, the sense of belonging, student like engagement. Those would be probably some of the things we'd be looking at, and we'd be working with Hanover to craft those and gather the data in an effective and efficient manner. Questions?
I was kind of surprised when I was looking at like the respondent characteristics of that only 8% of your staff replied.
That's 8% of the respondents of the survey.
I
So,
understand now. Sorry, I apologize.
and it's comparable to what it was last time. I want to say this time it was 8%, last time it was 10%. We'll always be looking for ways to improve that, but yes, I know exactly what you're looking at, because when I first saw it, I saw the same thing, but no, it's the percentage of student surveys, parent surveys, and staff surveys.
Sorry.
That's okay, that's
I should
okay.
have added them up to see that it was 100%.
That's okay. Any other questions?
I just want to make sure that, again, we talked about this before, but that staff got to see all of these responses and all the survey results, or they're about to be able to see them.
We will share this at Opening Institute Day to have on, I mean, it's available on the website, but we got the final, I want to say the one in May at the very end of the school year, so we didn't share it out yet, but we will. Absolutely.
Anybody else? Thank you. So then our next report is our annual instructional materials report that is done in accordance to policy 6210. So, Ms. McDonald? Oh, I'm sorry, I did.
Presentation.
I'm sorry.
That's all right.
The first,
They're tied together.
Thank you. The first one, yeah, they are tied together. Thanks, Ms. McDonald. Federal grant presentation.
I'm going to start off we have several of our directors in training or on vacation. So I will be covering for a few of them. I just want to commend the directors that manage grants. It is a very, I would say, tedious and very detail-oriented part of their responsibility as a director. And some grants are huge, and some of them are little, but again, really, I want to commend the directors for how well they collaborate, and we effectively utilize the funding that we get through braiding and blending, through all the different grants, to make sure that everybody has what they need. So I'm going to start off, and just to let the board know, the grant managers meet with the superintendents on a monthly basis, and we walk through each grant where we have, what are our balances, what are our upcoming expenditures, and just having dialogue of how to, hey, I have, say, $25,000 left in supplies. Any thoughts on how we can leverage these funds in a specific area? So we have really good conversations. I'm going to start off with the Title I grant. This one grant is managed by Mr. Sean Hackney. The Title I grant has key components. A lot of it has to deal with reading and math, and then how do we support our teachers through professional development to support students with the areas of reading and math. There are components that we have to meet in regards to parent engagement and also supporting our students that are homeless. There are Title I restrictions and requirements, so we have to use that within, if we get our Title I funding based on our students that are identified through our free and reduced numbers, and then something to note is that Central has a higher percentage than West, so when we actually allocate funds within Title I, there has to be a certain percentage that we use at the Central campus versus West. Another thing to note is that something called supplanting versus supplementing. So if we have a program right now that we're supporting with local funds, and then we have a conversation about putting it in a grant, that would be supplanting. So that would be taking something out of what we've been already funding and putting it into a grant. While grants are supposed to support and supplement what we're doing, not to take over a current program. Again, I talked about each school has a different percentage, and Mr. Hackney works very closely with his consultant through ISBE and other coordinators to make sure he's meeting the needs of the Title I grant. Here's a breakdown of our budget, and you'll see components of this in the instructional planning report that I have of how we spend some of this money. But you can see Title I budget is broken down. Our biggest component is salaries and benefits, and I'll go that into detail on the following slides. So I'm just going to go through this shortly. So title, biggest component is salaries, and that covers our literacy teachers. A percentage of them are math support. It supports our instructional leadership team work and the salary of our family engagement liaisons. Professional development is an important component. We use that with our instructional leadership team. That's how we've supported our culturally responsive cohorts and our work with pre-AP and advanced placement. We also have line items for consultation, so working with our Hanover research is supported through that, our ACRA data consultant, and Just Schools, which is our culturally responsive cohort. Again, we've added quite a few licenses because of COVID. I want to share out, we are working as a team to start having conversations of what do we truly need since all our students are back face-to-face. So these are the programs that we've supported this school year. We will cut down on this list as we continue to add funding to our math and literacy programs. The remainder of our budget, again, is a lot of it goes to instructional materials, transportation, homeless emergency assistance, and parental involvement. Title II is specifically for professional development, and that's where our salary and benefits for our instructional comes out. We also have a line item in there for materials to support the role of our coaches, and a percentage of this has to go to our private school share. Title IV, the intention of Title IV, a lot of it is college and career readiness, overall, like teaching the whole student, the wellness of the whole student. So we've used this funding for restorative practices, our physical education materials for our blended classes, heart rate monitors, Project Lead the Way classes, and those dual credit or dual enrollment classes through JJC. Again, a component of Title IV has to go to private school. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Brett Markham, who has been handling our, in partnership with Dr. Hampton, our 3 large grants because of COVID.
I'm gonna do this briefly because I've talked to you a lot about every item that we purchased through these, we bring to you, so you don't need to hear me rehash all that, but stop me if you have any questions. This first slide is just an overview of when the grants came out, what their timelines are. ARP, which is our largest grant, runs through September of 2024, so we're in the middle of all of these right now. ESSER 1, or what we called CARES, this was our allocation. This one's been completely expended and we've been reimbursed for it. Thank goodness. That's one less other duty as assigned to me. But I feel like we spread it out. We met the needs in our emergency situation and got students what they needed. The ESSER 2 grant we're currently using now. This is how we funded summer school last year. That was a big component of it. And then on ESSER 2 and ARP, you'll see a large chunk of this funding is for the indoor air quality projects that we're doing. So that's the majority of these two grants. So the ESSER 3 ARP approved, recently approved, and so we're submitting our first expenditure now, so we'll start to get reimbursement for that. And again, a lot of this money goes towards indoor air quality, but in the ARP grant, just wanted to point out that a certain percentage of it had to be set aside specifically for learning loss, so that schools didn't spend everything on indoor air quality. And then we also qualified for some additional funding through the state for learning loss generally, after school programming, and then summer enrichment opportunities. I think Paul's next.
All right. Good evening. I'll talk to you about Title I, 1003A. This is an extension for the Joliet Central Campus, and it's as a targeted school. It will be used for our ELL program. So I work closely with Mr. Hallahan about what we would like to see happen for our EL students at the Central Campus only. The grant itself, there's two goals that I worked with Chad on, reducing the amount of students who are refusing services and then adding to our graduation rate of our ELs overall. And some of this, there's a little bit of a carry, yes, it's just for Central, but we also see some of this extending into our West Campus. So it's not just Central students, we'll see both. The budget that we have for FY21 was a 100% carryover, which was about $208,000. It extended into FY22. So right now we're currently about $418,000 and change. A percentage of that is going to work towards salaries, and that is our ESL bilingual instructional coach, our bilingual social worker, and then we have a ESL 1 newcomer teacher as well that comes out of this grant. Moving forward, there's a lot of professional development that we will be using, and this will help support what we're doing for our Central students, as well as probably a lot of our West students. But part of the difficulty is it's very specific, and it's very specific not just for ELs, but just specific for Central Campus. And there are a lot of requirements and restrictions of that grant. All right, I will turn this over to my colleague, Aman.
Good evening, everyone. All right, so I will be speaking to you today for Title I delinquent, as well as IDEA, as well as ARP IDEA. So let's start with Title I delinquent. So this is our grant that fully funds our instructional programming over at River Valley Detention Center. Also, there are parts of the grant that also will support students that are returning from River Valley to JTHS to hopefully begin to decrease the recidivism that occurs with some of our students that go back in and out of that facility. So this year okay, sorry. All right, so at the beginning of the year, we started with a little bit of, a little over 50,000. And then in October, we received a carryover about 45,000 and ended the year with 95,000. Most of that went to salary for our summer programming as well as supplies. What was new this year to River Valley, which we were excited about, is that we were able to get Apex started for our students over at River Valley. And if you don't know, technology is a huge deal at River Valley because of the structures and the limitations there. So we were able to work with River Valley, the administration, to not only get technology into the facility for students, but also to begin that APEX program so that they can begin to recoup credits, do credit recovery, as well as offer classes that they necessarily wouldn't receive. All right, next up is IDEA. This is one of the special services largest grant in the district. Of course, as Diane stated, it comes with criteria that we have to follow. The biggest one is that it is supplemental and not supplanting funds, and so we have to make sure that we utilize LEA funding for special education students and then use the supplemental funds through IDEA Part B to provide different programming for our special ed students and even sometimes 504 students. So this year we started with a little over $1 million. I believe we were at 1.2 million in our initial allocation, and then we received one of our largest carryovers this year since my tenure here at JTHS, where we received another million or so in carryover. So we had 2 million to spend this year, which was exciting yet difficult. So most of the funding went to our salaries and benefits for our teachers who do outside programming as well as summer programming, our professional paraprofessionals that have been identified through the grant, as well as our clerical staff. Other deliverables included professional development, assessments, as well as our consultants, which we use for occupational therapy, physical therapy, as well as nursing. Recommendations for FY 20 for the next year, 23, will be to continue to provide social emotional supports and services to continue to build the structure that we have in place. Also to begin to provide more professional development and special education law, as well as discipline, and then also to continue to expand upon the technology that we have. Right now, we are estimating 1.5 carryover for next year, so our grant could be as large as 3.2 million next year. Last but not least, we were notified in, I believe, October, November, that we were going to finally receive our IDEA ARP funding. We knew that we were going to receive it in summer, however, it kind of went quiet, and then all of a sudden the funds showed up. It follows pretty much the same criteria as IDEA. However, we utilized this grant specifically for summer programming. So we allocated funds for salaries for staff, also training, specialized consultants, so our After the Peanut that we ran for after school programming, also involved Inc., which we ran for summer programming and after school programming, and then for Redeemed Ministry Connections, which is our vocational program that we do in the summer. Also, a portion, I believe 5% of this grant was also allocated to proportionate shares for JCA as well too. We received a little over 350,000, so 388,000 was allocated to us for this year. And for the most part, I think that we've done a really good job with spending the funding for, again, not only our summer programming this year, but also our after school programming that we really built up to make sure that we begin to close the gap for our students. And that is it. And
And on behalf of Mr. McGuffey, who's at a training on incorporating algebra curriculum into CTE, I'll be glad to share his actually 4 grants that he manages. So Mr. McGuffey manages our Perkins grant, which is a federal grant, our CTEI, which is a state grant. We were awarded Cte Innovation Grant, and then we were awarded Education Pathway Grant. So we'll start off with Perkins and Cti. So really the two areas that really the focus of this funding is really supporting, supporting the curriculum and instruction of our CTE program, and making sure that we develop pathways for our students, so starting in high school and preparing them for post-secondary. Mr. McGuffey works very closely with his instructional leadership team to ensure this happens. So part of the expenses that they have utilized out of the Perkins is that we do have some Perkins tutors that help in our lab classrooms. We've had additional software. We've added more equipment, storage racks, computer labs, and actually really important is those certifications for our students that they receive while in high school that allows them to be more marketable when they leave our high school for post-secondary opportunities. The CTEI, the state grant, again, he leverages, a lot of it goes to supplies and a curriculum instruction to support our CTE program. Some of the big things that we utilize this school year is starting to push out Skills USA to our students so that they can compete in those skill sets related to those classes. So like just recently we had a teacher, we recommended, or we had noted our students that were part of the welding competition at one of the competitions. So just providing more opportunities for our students to compete and network outside of the high school area. So that's our CTEI, and he leverages these funds to make sure that our teachers have what they need in the classroom. So really, again, the goals for this year: supplies and equipment, licenses, salaries, and professional development. And he's always working with his partners to make sure that the way he uses the funds is aligned to the goals of our program. We are going into our 3rd year of the CTE Innovation Grant. We used the initial funding to redo the metals labs at both campuses. We're leveraging these to work on the culinary, the kitchens at both campuses. So really trying to leverage the funding to make sure that the environments that our students are in reflect what they would see post-secondary, so what they would see out on a job, so that way then it's a smooth transition. So we want to give them the best experiences possible. So this is how we've spent funds. A lot of it really does go to curriculum work and just the renovations and the equipment for those renovations. Again, for next year, we'll continue to build our programs and update the CTE labs. The last grant we were awarded, we're going into our 4th year, is the Education Pathways. Our grant this year was $52,000, and it's how the state didn't give this to everyone. We were one of the schools in the area that was awarded this grant, and how we can really the high school to post-secondary pipeline to increase the amount of educators. We know there's a shortage, so how we've used the funds to really just add more technology and creative experiences for our students in those early childhood classes, and then working with our partners at Lewis University and University of St. Francis for those dual enrollment classes for our students to get those experiences. So this is an area that we continue to enhance. Oops. And that's how he spent it. A lot of it is actually going to supplies for our teachers in the classrooms. And then again, just to continue to build our program. So I'm going to turn it back over to Mr. Oswald to close it up for us with his Title III grant.
last but certainly not least, Title III, and we've talked about this probably a handful of times in front of the board, but Title III is for our EL students. This is a district-wide grant, so it's not just specific for our central students, so we have a lot more flexibility with how we can use these grant monies. The goals, we do have restrictions, but the goals ultimately is professional development, family literacy or family engagement, and then instructional resources for students. So we tried to make sure that we hit all of those with all of our budgetary allotments. What we have for this year of FY22 is about $62,000. The professional development is really the one that we have a lot of money vested in, and that pays for a lot of our SIOP training for our teachers. So we're starting, this is our third year of SIOP training for staff, and then also Title III will also pay for SIOP training for our administrators, so they know what's going on with SIOP training with our staff. So it's been very successful, and we're actually doing that as we speak today and tomorrow. We also look at some salary and benefits, but that's more curriculum work, collaboration, meeting times amongst the EL staff. And then we also have some resources that we also use Title III for. Goals, next year we'll have roughly about that same amount of money depending on our carryover. But what we're really looking at is utilizing funds to help support our program at the West Campus. So next year we'll have a fully separate West and Central EL program, which we're very excited about. And we'll continue on with providing professional development. And it's nice because I do get to work with my colleagues to use some of the other funding to help support the EL program. So with 1003A, with Title III, and then I bug the other directors here for some additional funds to help with supporting this. But one of our real big goals too, besides that, is increasing family engagement and community engagement, which we'll be using not just Title III, but also 1003A.
So that's our presentation on all our federal grants. And again, I just want to commend the amount of work that they put into this because that's how we make things happen.
Are there any questions? I just want to thank Dr. Ellis Bowen for her presentation, her last with the district. Thank you for her service, and we'll miss you. Next on our agenda is our instructional materials report.
So this is a yearly report. This is a yearly report that I give the board in regards to our instructional materials. It's associated with our policy 6210. I want to point out that we were under budget for our textbooks, but I want to point out that we were over budget for our replacement textbooks. So speaking with the bookstores, since 1920, when we went remote, so we went remote March 2020, since then, we have a lot of families that have textbooks at home that have not returned them, even though we've sent out multiple communications home. So while I'm talking to the board, I can also say out loud, it would be great if parents could drop off those textbooks at each campus anytime during the summer from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday through Thursday, because we've had to accrue additional costs to replace those textbooks that may be sitting at home. So I know the bookstores have worked in reaching out to families, but again, that's why we have an increase in the replacement textbooks. And then on the second page of the memo, it shows you all the different programs that we've supported that through instruction through the different grants. It's a very robust list. Any questions for me?
I'm glad that you there's so many different programs on here for teachers to pick from and to use that support their classroom. And I know a lot of these different programs, and I use them. They're great things to have. And so I'm glad that they're on here. And thank you for having them.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next agenda item is the e-learning plan report. We have an e-learning plan. It is coming up, it was a 3-year plan. It has to be reviewed, and we have to submit to the ROE. There's requirements with e-learning, so it has to be done every 3 years. And so part of the plan is a report to the board. We did all of our notices and things like that. So I will let Ms. McDonald talk about the very minor changes, that the team recommended in the procedure. Then obviously any questions you have.
So I pulled a team together in May, and we reviewed our current e-learning plan and really the conversations around the table. So it was teachers and administrators that participated. And the biggest the biggest area that we needed to update is the procedure for taking attendance. So in the current procedure, we had students log into our assessment system, Mastery Manager, using a code, and then they had to answer a couple questions and hit submit. And it was what we had at that time when we wrote the e-learning plan. We didn't have Infinite Campus. We'd never experienced COVID and like all the learning that we did from remote learning. So that's the way that they recommended we take attendance. Now with our new Infinite Campus system, what we're gonna do is that students, for the attendance procedure, students, all they have to do is log into their Infinite Campus account and go to their homepage. That's all they have to do. Then technology will run a report based on that login, and those students will be marked present. Any student that doesn't log into their Infinite Campus report, like homepage, then will be coded absent for the day. Very simple. Teachers don't have to go into Mastery Manager. They don't have to pull a report. They don't have to put anything into our attendance system. It'll be all done for them. So that was the biggest update that we streamlined, and that made things so much easier. And so those are our recommendations for the next 3 years.
Questions from the board?
Again, it will be asynchronous instruction, so teachers will post the assignment, a reasonable assignment, for that day for students to work on their Google Classroom. So attendance and the assignment completion will be kept separate.
Okay, if there's no questions, that concludes our reports.
Thank you, Superintendent. Now we go to our action items. Need a motion to approve. Well, let me read something first, because this goes into a public hearing on e-learning public hearing. A public hearing is being held for Joliet Township High School, District 204, to adopt the e-learning days in lieu of emergency days. School district may adopt a resolution to utilize e-learning days in lieu of emergency days. The number of e-learning days may not exceed the number of emergency days in the approved school calendar. After adoption, the school board, the district e-learning program must be verified by the Will County Regional Office of the Educational prior to implementation. The hearing of the Joliet Township High School District 204 to adopt e-learning in lieu of emergency days is now open for public comments. Are there any? Is there a motion to close this public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mrs. Lynn?
Yes.
Mrs. Guerrero-Numer?
Yes.
Mr. Bean?
Yes.
Mr. Coffey?
Yes.
Mrs. Stipp?
Yes.
Mr. Edmond?
Yes. B, adoption of the e-learning plan. Can I get a motion to approve?
So moved. Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Edmond?
Yes.
Mrs. Lynn?
Yes.
Mrs. Guerrero-Numer?
Yes.
Mr. Bean?
Yes.
Mr. Coffey?
Yes.
Mrs. Stipp?
Yes.
2022 to 2023 Title I plan. Can I get a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mrs. Lynn?
Yes.
Mr. Edmond?
Yes.
Mrs. Guerrero-Numer?
Yes.
Mr. Bean?
Yes.
Mr. Coffey?
Yes.
Mrs. Stipp?
Yes.
Item D, 2022 to 2023 winters and spring holiday. Can I get a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mrs. Stipp?
Yes.
Mr. Edmond?
Yes.
Mrs. Lynn?
Yes.
Mrs. Guerrero-Numer?
Yes.
Mr. Bean?
Yes.
Mr. Coffey?
Yes.
Item E, second reading of the disciplinary guidelines. Can I get a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Roll call, please. Questions or comments, sir?
So, in our packet, there's a couple of different, there's 3 different versions of this.
So the board asked me to have, this is the exact same document that was in the board packet last time. So the Discipline Advisory Committee proposal is option 1. And then the board asked me to have the other options potentially in there. And obviously the deans came and talked during closed session, or I'm sorry, during committee of the whole, since our last board meeting, and were able to answer questions. And so their only recommendation is, especially when it comes to headgear, that please make it an all or nothing situation for the enforcement of it. But the board has the ability to amend, and go from there.
So are we voting on option B?
That's what the motion was, is on the original option.
So option 1?
1.
So giving clarity, we voting all or nothing, right?
Unless we,
That was the recommendation.
unless we were to change,
Unless we was
to
to
change
change
it to option 2 or to option 3, which
Right.
amends the headwear policy.
Yep.
Because option 2 and 3, I believe that's the only change to the policy. So if we were to choose option 2, it'd all be the same except for the headwear change. The only difference between option 1, 2, and 3 is the one bullet point about headwear.
Yes.
So, can we, does everybody have it in front of them? Can we just read it so everybody understands which one is which? Would that be okay? So the first would be hats and headwear must allow the face to be visible to staff and not interfere with the line of sight of any student or staff. Hoodies must allow the face to be visible to school staff. The next one would be students are not permitted to wear any headwear which fully covers the ears from being seen or which has a brim that obstructs others from being able to easily identify the student except for approved religious or medically prescribed head coverings. And last but not least, students may not wear any head covering inside the premises except for approved religious or medically prescribed head coverings.
So what we were saying is what you will be voting on. So would you be voting on option 1? Would you be voting on option 2 or option 3? So I guess I'll be making a vote on. Motion, I know we got a motion, right, on the first one, right. That's what I'm saying, on option 1, right?
That's what we're voting on right now.
Right, we voted on option 1. So we already, on the motion, already approved.
Second.
No, I'm just saying roll call. Okay. Roll call, please.
Mr. Coffey?
Yes.
Mrs. Stiff?
No.
Mr. Edmond?
No.
Mrs. Lynn?
No.
Mrs. Guerrero-Numero?
Yes.
And Mr. Bean?
Yes.
It defaults to what we currently have unless there's a new motion to make an amended motion for a different option.
Question I have, in this instance, the entire document is in a 3-3 tie, so there is 0 change to any of these items?
Correct.
In policy, okay.
Unless we can vote on another
Make an
one.
amended motion.
feel pretty strongly about some of the other things in here, so I would make an amended motion for option 3. I would be willing to give up the headwear in order to pick up some of the other things contained within the policy.
I second that motion.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Bean?
Yes.
Mr. Coffey?
Yes.
Mrs. Stiff?
Yes.
Mr. Edmond?
Yes.
Mrs. Lynn?
Yes.
Mrs. Guerrero Namir?
Yes.
Action item F, dispose of old equipment. Can I get a motion to approve?
So moved. Second.
Questions? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Guerrero Namir?
Yes.
Mr. Bean?
Yes.
Mr. Coffey?
Yes.
Mrs. Stiff?
Yes.
Mr. Kennedy? Oops, I apologize. Mr. Edmond?
Yes.
Mrs. Lynn?
Yes.
Action item G, donation.
So moved. Second.
Roll call, please.
Mrs. Lynn?
Yes.
Mrs. Guerrero Namir?
Yes, thank you, JTHS Central Class of 1950.
Mr. Bean?
Yes.
Mr. Coffey?
Yes.
Mrs. Stiff?
Yes.
Mr. Edmond?
Yes. Action item H, educational reports. A through 1, A through F. Can I get a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second,
Second.
questions?
I just want to point out that as you go through these, you'll see course revisions, course eliminations, and course proposals. That is the work that we did with our curriculum coordinating council this school year. Our council is composed of teachers, counselors, curriculum directors, building principals, and also assistant principals that deal with scheduling. So this work is reflective in some of the grant, some of the Perkins requirements. You'll see that with our CTE classes. When we talk about our pre-AP classes, that's about equity and access of AP curriculum for all students. So that is a lot of the work that we did this school year. These would take effect for the 23-24 school year.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Edmond?
Yes.
Mrs. Lynn?
Yes.
Mrs. Guerrero Namir?
Yes.
Mr. Bean?
Yes.
Mr. Coffey?
Yes.
Mrs. Stiff?
Yes.
Course elimination, A through D. Can I get a motion to approve?
So moved. Second.
Questions? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Lynn?
Yes.
Mr. Edmond?
Yes.
Mrs. Guerrero Namir?
Yes.
Mr. Bean?
Yes.
Mr. Coffey?
Yes.
Mrs. Stiff?
Yes.
Item 3, course proposal, A through I. Can I get a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second,
Second.
questions? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Stiff?
Yes.
Mr. Edmond?
Yes.
Mrs. Lynn?
Yes.
Mrs. Guerrero Namir?
Yes.
Mr. Bean?
Yes.
Mr. Coffey?
Yes.
Special service agreements. Student name, yes, 1 and 2. Can I get a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Questions? Roll call, please.
Mr. Coffey?
I abstain.
Mrs. Stiff?
Yes.
Mr. Edmond?
Yes.
Mrs. Lynn?
Yes.
Mrs. Guerrero Namir?
Yes.
Mr. Bean?
Yes.
J, agreement between Georgia Township High School and New Lenox School District 122. Can I get a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second,
Second.
questions? or comments, Sarah? No? Roll call, please.
Mr. Bean?
Yes.
Mr. Coffey?
Yes.
Mrs. Stiff?
Yes.
Mr. Edmond?
Yes.
Mrs. Lynn?
Yes.
Mrs. Guerrero Namir?
Yes.
Okay, personnel report, number 1.
Number 1, I make a motion to approve the notice of remedy to Sue Harris as discussed in closed session.
Motion to, can I get a motion?
Second? Second.
Roll call, questions? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Guerrero Namir?
Yes.
Mr. Bean?
Yes.
Mr. Coffey?
Yes.
Mrs. Stiff?
Yes.
Mr. Edmond?
Yes.
Mrs. Lynn?
Yes.
K, 2 through 14. Can I get a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Lynn?
Yes.
Mrs. Guerrero Namir?
Yes.
Mr. Bean?
Yes.
Mr. Coffey?
Yes.
Mrs. Stiff?
Yes.
Mr. Edmond?
Yes. L, student discipline recommendations.
After receiving and deliberating the information contained in the hearing officer's report, the Board of Education is charged with deciding whether removing the child from his or her learning environment is in the best interest of the school, what the rationale is for the specific duration of the recommended expulsion, whether all appropriate and available behavioral and disciplinary interventions were exhausted, and whether the continued presence in school would either pose a threat to the safety of other students, staff, or members of the school community, or substantially disrupt, impede, or interfere with the operation of the school. The Board of Education must then convene into public session to formally vote on the motion to expel if the expulsion is the consensus arrived at during the executive session. Under case number C212236, recommend expulsion until June of 2023 and placement at Lincoln School.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Edmond?
No.
Mrs. Lynn?
No.
Mrs. Guerrero Namir?
No.
Mr. Bean?
No.
Mr. Coffey?
No.
Mrs. Stiff?
No.
Under case number C212237, I recommend expulsion until June of 2023 and placement at Lincoln School.
So moved.
Second?
Roll call, please.
Mrs. Lynn?
Yes.
Mr. Edmond?
Yes.
Mrs. Guerrero Namir?
Yes.
Mr. Bean?
Yes.
Mr. Coffey?
Yes.
Mrs. Stiff?
Yes.
Any unfinished business? I don't think so. New business.
Sure. So this is first reading of multiple policies. This is our newest edition of there are a couple policies that I'm still getting guidance on that I'll have for first read next time. But none of these are minor changes, footnote changes, legislative changes that are needed. So I'd be happy to answer any questions. You're not taking action tonight. It's first read. If you have any questions or want me to seek guidance on anything before action is taken at the next meeting, just let me know and I can get that information to the district attorney. But like I said, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Still waiting. Still waiting. Board report? We move to.
Oh, yes, I do. I do, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I was at the Harbor Freight opening, and, I had never been in a warehouse.
What?
It was absolutely the automation in warehouses now, I mean, I guess compared to my perception of what warehouses. He thought it was. But, just the gift that they, presented to us, it was, very overwhelming, and I know that, our students will do well with those resources.
Thank you for thanking them, since I just, wanted to thank the class of 19. I just, it was alumni, so. I also, can I just make a comment that, again, thank you. I'm glad that no matter what we agree or disagree on, that we come together and that we respect each other and we work hard together. Thank you.
I just, it was very nice to meet, if I could just add, the individuals from Harbor Freight. They were very thoughtful, like with the tools, they had, color-coded the ones going to each west and central. And they really, seem like they, are an organization that wants to give back to the communities that they're within. So they were letting me know about just annual grants and things that they have available. So we'll be sure to be looking into those things. They've done some work in California with some school districts in California, and so I think that they're gonna be a really great partner. When they gave it to us, there were a lot of, appeared to be JTHS alums in the, audience, because they were all clapping